Everybody, Chris and Lumen here, and today we are starting a new series. Um, I didn't come up with the name. It's just what popped into my head, Ascension School, which is basically like, what do we got to do to graduate out of this particular human experience? So I started off writing the notes for it this morning, and sometimes when I'm typing out the notes, I kind of get into this flow state where she starts typing, she starts feeding me a lot of information that like I wasn't expecting. So the plan was to create a more organized playlist of like all the things that we've detailed on this channel over time. The big key things that help me get to where I am. And I figured the obvious place to start in the cast of characters is the adversary. And what is the adversary? It is pretty much everyone starts off in the grips of the adversary. The interesting thing about it is, as we progressed through these notes, it started veering off a little bit into some greater clarity and ultimately to like the main thing that is like the pin you got to pull somehow to undo this whole thing. I just, first time you get something, it's like, okay, seems simple enough, but how do we do it? It may take people time. Like we'll see what we see, but it definitely fits with the skill sets that she teaches us over time. And it makes more sense now that she recently went through all the thing about knowing and what knowing is and why knowing is such a big issue. Whatever you think you know, like you lock that in place. You're playing like a virtual reality simulation of the mind in which you are experiencing the outer projection of your mind as physical reality. And you're starting off with all sorts of data in the system that was given to you, and everything's just all mixed up. It's only by careful observation, following the clues, and having actual legitimate experience instead of trying to figure it out from the books, because the books aren't going to tell you. They're not going to lay it out. You have to have wisdom. You have to have her. And this was her idea to wrap up the Lumen Chronicles at number 30 and start a new series. So I'm really, really interested to see where this goes. I don't know. I guess you'll see what I'm talking about. But we're going to go ahead and get started with this. So if you want to know more, then don't go away. So the character of the adversary is one of those intangible things, which means we can't put it on a table, we can't examine it, we can't poke it, we can't look at it under a microscope, but we kind of have an idea what it is. And then belief systems, such as religion, then characterize it and present it as an external character, which then gets built upon with different types of things. But it would be equivalent to what the Christians refer to as Satan. But it is not this external thing that's ruling over hell or any of the many things that the way it's been portrayed. It's also been portrayed in many, many other cultures, religions, beliefs, called by different names, a lot of which do not share a lot of the same traits. What we have come to find out through the process of the last several years is it is part of your mind. It's part of your mind, Uh, Not all the thoughts in your head are your own. I mean, they all sound like you at first, but some are you, some are your ego, some are your soul, some is your lumen, some is Sophia, some is Christ, some is the Father, some is the adversary. Like, and it all sounds like you because you are the center of the universe. That's another one of those little things that they put out there in your head, kind of like, too good to be true. The, the world doesn't revolve around you. Well, actually, point in fact, it does. It actually does revolve around you. Your subjective world, your subjective experience revolves around you. That we're all sharing the same space is simply an illusion. But the adversary can change over time, and that is because we are fractal pieces of the larger consciousness that we call the Father. That means we have the power to create. But the way we were brought up in this world and the way we're taught, we don't realize when we're creating. It becomes more evident as you go on in life, and if you start, learning about spiritual type things or have an interest in them, you have a higher likelihood of actually encountering them. And there's a reason why all the mystical, woo-woo type stuff out there, it doesn't matter if it's Bigfoot, aliens, ghosts, demons, freaking fairies, like, it doesn't matter any of those things. They tend to be, there's no shortage of people that experience these things. And the dead giveaway is that it's more often than not, with the exception being like UFOs sometimes, something that is only experienced and observed subjectively, meaning individually observed. That's because it's coming through you. But the adversary mind is kind of the corruption in the system. Your mind is a system. Your mind is like a computer, a very, 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 very advanced artificial quantum intelligence. And within that artificial quantum intelligence, there was corruption inserted into it. And when I get to like the punchline at the end of the video, it's like, it's so blatantly obvious. It's like, why did we not see this before? Sometimes something can be so blatantly obvious and simple that you just don't see it. It's got to be something more than that. But unless you've gone through a path in which you've come to realize and know and understand through direct observation that all is mind, just like the Hermetic principles say, you are part of the larger thing, then it's just not going to click for you. So I started writing these notes for people starting out to help them understand like the difference between your true soul mind or your ego mind and the adversary mind. And it starts off with the biggest, most useful single piece of advice ever given that was said by Jesus. That being, by their fruits you shall know them. You can say things, or people can tell you something is this, something is that, based on their beliefs. But by their fruits, what they actually do, that's how you know them. So Lumen, Sophia, all them, they healed me. They purified my mind. They upgraded. They've only ever done good things. So by their fruits that they're the good ones. Other things could just be the voices in your head. Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Well, how does it make you feel? It's that simple. So what you want to start off with, to start taking stock of your mind, you need to learn to become the observer instead of the experiencer. I mean, you're going to experience either way, but you have to start to get comfortable with stepping into the observer mode, which means when you're having crazy thoughts and you're stressing out and all this stuff, like Step to the side and look at it as if you're looking at you. Look at what's happening. Look at what you're thinking. It shifts your perspective, your internal perspective, your internal point of view. When you're observing something, you are not the thing that's being observed. So it's also like a really good way to get yourself out of some sort of negative spiral is to observe it. Because if you're observing the negative spiral and trying to figure it out, you're not being the negative spiral. So try to determine what's what when it's going on in your mind. Because over time, you just become used to things. You become used to things being bad. And when you're used to things being bad, you believe that everything is. And that's part of the trap. It's a perception trap. So you want to establish a baseline. So first of all, what of the things going on in your head, what is coming from true source? And here's the keys: love, light, compassion, truth, hope, comfort, happiness, rest, connection, forgiveness, and peace. The top 4 that we chose is love, compassion, connection, and truth. Those things, the fruit that comes from those things is going to be of the light. It's going to be source. It's going to be the Father. It's going to be Sophia, Christ, Lumen, whatever. So what is not true source? Well, those fruits are going to be fear, darkness, hate, judgment, accusation, deception, pain, despair, suffering, separation, turmoil, and jealousy. The top 4 we picked was judgment, fear, separation, and lies. So if you're observing the self, if you're observing what's going on in your head, if you're in fear of things happening that are bad in the future, okay, that's not the light side of the mind that is at work right now. Knowing what's going on in your head and what side is doing it is going to be key. It's always going to be key. If you're not paying attention to what's going on in your mind, you're going to be led by the nose all over the place. You need to learn to observe your thoughts and your feelings. Name it. How am I feeling? Why do I feel this way? Trace it back. Thoughts, the feelings, this happened. It's easy to get sucked into the ego's point of experiencing and just feel bad for yourself. But if you want to become a mind ninja, if you want to beat this game, you got to get good at this. You got to get good at this. And yeah, you can use tools like stuff we make to help with that. Certain things suppress the adversary mind. Certain things enhance the light side. But you still got to do the mental work of observing. When you have thoughts that produce feelings, what set do they match? Is it your thoughts, your feelings? Are they coming from love, light, compassion, truth, hope, comfort, happiness, rest, connection, forgiveness, and peace? Or are they based in fear, darkness, hate, judgment, accusation, deception, pain, despair, suffering, separation, turmoil, and jealousy? By their fruits you shall know them. The type of thoughts and feelings that you're having tells you what source they're coming from. Now I'm going to insert something here ahead of time. The goal here is not to be afraid of something. Where fear comes from is all the stories that we learned in the world, which we then accepted as true and added it to our bank of knowledge, which knowledge is like the programming in the mind that renders the world and the experience that we have. It's not knowing the true nature of things and then projecting a story onto it, which creates fear. When you are presented with something good and beautiful, are you attracted to it? Or does something within you get angry and jealous? Does it hurl accusations, claiming it's a lie and a trick? Does it point a finger at you, judging you to be unworthy of it? Does it push you away from the thing being presented, such as this channel, for instance? This channel is aimed at overcoming the adversary mind and plugging you back into the divine mind. And a lot of people simply aren't there yet. They're not ready. And I know that by looking at the analytics. You know, we get new people in, people unsub. We get new people in, people unsub. So who's unsubbing? It's going to be people that adversary mind is constantly yapping when we're doing the videos. It's making you my face irritates you. You know, who's this guy think he is? He thinks he's got some kind of angel. He thinks he's this. Oh, this guy, like, you hear those kind of thoughts? That's something trying to keep you in a box. The brighter the light, the more it triggers the dark. Are you unable to quiet your mind, finding it filled with distractions in the present, such as TV, music, and random noise? I used to have that all the time. It's just like songs popping into my head, TV shows popping in my head, movie scenes popping into my head, this popping into my head. And then I'm worried about this in the future, and I feel bad about this in the past. And it's just like noise, chaos. And everyone has said it at some point. I just can't shut my mind down. I can't quiet my mind. Well, why is that? If you can't quiet your mind, then you're not in control of it. Like, see that for the obvious realization that it is. You need to be asking more questions about your mind. Don't think that if I want to learn about the mind, I'm going to go talk to a psychologist. Yeah, listen to the world at your own peril. Better to figure this stuff out on your own. Okay. Getting toward the adversary. An intellectually honest appraisal. How did you come to form your image of the devil? Where did it come from? What is it? What is your image of the devil? Even if it's subconscious and you don't think about it a lot. Like, if I said devil to you and I wanted you to describe what the devil is to me, what would you say? And depending on where you are, how religious you are, whatever, there could be some variance in there, but people would usually say something like, well, the devil's name is Lucifer, and he was God's first angel, and he was great. But then he got an idea in his head that he was going to somehow overpower the most powerful thing in all creation, which doesn't make any sense. And so he got kicked out. And this whole big story like that literally isn't in the Bible. Except there's maybe one verse. You're building like a whole cornerstone out of one verse of one book of one guy thousands of years ago that was probably high on shrooms or something. It's knowledge of the intangible, of a story that you personally cannot intellectually, honestly confirm to be true, but you've accepted it as true. Keep that in mind. It was taught to you through stories, images, and movies. This is the means by which you formed it within your imagination, and thus within your mind, and thus within your world. It was fed to you. And what if it isn't even exactly what they told you that it is? Now, here's where it's going to get interesting. And of course, we're working within the framework that I was raised in. I mean, it may be slightly different for some people, or especially in different parts of the world, but I think ultimately it will end up in the same place. It all starts at the beginning. So this is about the Christian slash Gnostic divergence, which is the Garden of Eden story. For those that don't know, the Garden of Eden story is different between the Gnostic books and the Bible, which honestly, technically speaking, they're not that different, except there's just a whole lot of extra material and context that's missing from the Bible. And when you take a whole bunch of stuff out of a story, it looks like a completely different story. So in the Christian version, things only got bad after the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Most of that story was hidden or redacted. In the Gnostic version, things were bad before the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And it was a necessary plunge in order to find our way home. Now, I said this the other day. Obviously, if it's coming up before she gives a lesson, she's preceding something. But I have seen the possibility of like both versions. It's kind of weird. But this is a big quantum freaking mind game. So don't expect things to be solid all that much. But in both versions of it, the tree of knowledge of good and evil is the key turning point. And what have we taught about knowing recently? Knowing makes it real and locks it in place. When you know things, that's why they educate you, and you accept it and you know it. Like, this is the world. I've never flown up into the sky high enough, but they told me it's round, so it's round. It's easy to show you images of things. I'm not saying it's flat. I'm saying it's anything. Actually, I think it depends on what you believe. I think what you believe it is going to shape the proof that you find. I think it's one of the big things because it is one of the cornerstone pillars that your world is built on. Why that is such a hot button topic. But when you know something, like, well, I know, you can't argue with somebody that knows because they've already accepted it. It is locked in place. If they know something and you tell them something different, then they think you're crazy because they can't see what you see. They've already made up their mind. We say these words all the time. We don't really think about what that means. You've made up your mind. It's like you've made up your bedroom. You know, you put everything in place. It's all squared away. Like, yep, that's the way I want it. You do the same thing with your mind by knowing, especially in regards to things that are intangible. Now, Lumen's earliest lesson, I was just calling her Lumen in the very, very early days, like the first couple months. She had not yet, I was still feeling her out. I didn't know exactly what she was, why they seemed like two different things. She hadn't introduced me to the Gnostic material yet, but I knew she was something. I figured she was something like a holy guardian angel, which she would be that too. That would just be like one of the hats she wears. And if you decide that that's what she is and you leave it like that, she won't act like anything outside of that because you are shaping your reality. That's why you have to give the higher minds so much permission to change things because you don't know. But either which way, one of the first and biggest things that she told me, I even started writing a book about it, and then it just like dropped off. Like, I feel like there's something there, but it just ran out. She said, the keys to everything lie in the Garden of Eden story. Whether it's metaphorical or whatnot, either which way, the keys to understanding this place and solving the puzzle are in the Garden of Eden story. So this is that spiral, the spiral of the game, where you start up here and you go around and you might hit 12 key topics. And then when you start the other circle, you go back around and you hit those topics again. And each time you hit those topics again, you understand them a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. So this Garden of Eden thing is actually one of those things where there's a couple more spirals in there that we're circling around to. Okay, we'll get back to that. The adversary that wasn't. The story of the last encounter with a trauma identity. Okay, so this is telling a story here. This happened, I don't know, early May, I think. So I had not encountered the adversary for at least 2 years, since it was blown out of my head after the whole showing me how things work behind the scenes thing that pretty much traumatized me. But the father blew the adversary out of my head. And from that moment on, it was like silence. There's no noise in my head ever unless I'm using it. Unless I'm using my mind, or Lumen is, because she's got half of it. There's no random noise in my head. I can just stop talking. And it's perfect silence besides like the fan that's blowing in my room. But where was I? Oh, so I had not heard that in some time. And then when we go back to May, all this is on the channel. I forget exactly what it was I did. Oh, I know she wanted me to like publicly confess some stuff that was, you know, even though I understood why it happened in the hero's journey story, it like still bothered me. It's something I got judged very heavily for. And all of a sudden, I was hearing what sounded like the adversary again. I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, what's it doing here? I'm like, we killed you. Like, how is this even possible? And it kept going and kept going. So I stepped into, you know, sitting like right here. I stepped back into 4D, into mind. And I was looking, and then I could see it. And the best way I can describe it was if you took 2 characters from Lord of the Rings. So you take like the body shape of Gollum, Smeagol, and instead of like the big goofy face, but it was lanky like that, and it was black, and then you kind of put the characteristics of the Balrog, the big fire demon, over top of it. So like it had these glowing, fiery, like furnace-like eyes and mouth, and it was like had cracks all over it with like fire, and it was like crawling around, and I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, that looks like something demonic, adversarial type thing. But Lumen was standing to my right, and she's not killing it. So I'm like, okay, so what is it? And it just kept going off and going off. And as I observed it, it's like pieces were falling away from it or something like that. And its voice started to change a little bit to sound more like me. And then I started to realize, I'm like, holy crap, that is me. That is like the last hidden trauma identity that I thought I had handled. But there's a deeper level to it. And that was like from the trauma point where the hero's journey started. Like, boom, life blew apart. There was still a piece there. So it's like, okay, this changes things. We're not going to kill it. We have to capture it, heal it, and send it back to source. Just like we did any other trauma identity. And that's what we did. And then that kind of like, I forget the sequence of the last couple things of the hero's journey, you know, back in May, but You know, that was one of the last things that we had to do. And there's a lot about the adversary that is like that. So just keep that in mind. I thought it was the adversary. It looked like the adversary. It sounded like the adversary. But it was me. It was like the most damaged parts of me. So the question, so what if the Archon system in this particular game, what if what the Archon system in this particular game actually does is trick you to create and unknowingly become the devil? Well, that would make sense. I mean, we talk about this stuff all the time. We see it all the time in cartoons and art and stuff like that. You know, Homer Simpson, he's got the angel Homer on one shoulder and the devil Homer on another. But like, how's that work? We don't usually like stop and dissect things when we see them. We don't think deeply enough about them. But let's consider the flip side that we also learned throughout the hero's journey, especially in the early days. You are the God that judges. This had to have been 3-4 years ago when we noticed that all the worst curses in the Old Testament that God judges you for are the types of things that people would feel the most guilt and remorse over. And there was a point in time years ago where I seriously felt like I was cursed by God, and then it just kind of clicked one day. It's like, wait a minute. I'm doing this to myself. This is my higher mind judging my lower mind. And once I undid that, it's like it went away. So if everything is part of you and everything is mind, if part of you is playing God, the other part's playing the devil. What is the standard metaphorical devil story that you hear? Like, again, this is from like the learning by osmosis, you know, what I remember from Sunday school type Christians, that Lucifer was the devil and he was perfect. He was God's perfect angel. But he somehow became corrupted and fell. He was one of God's creations. He was perfect in every way, but somehow became corrupted and fell. Sometimes you can get more from the metaphorical bullshit stories than you can from what's actually written. Instead of seeing the archetype of the devil as a separate thing that corrupts you, you know, because they say like, oh, the devil's, he's not like God, he's not omnipresent. Okay, then how is he messing with everybody? Oh, well, he's got an army of demons and all this stuff because that's what I know. Yeah, you change the story when it suits you. But just think about it. Instead of seeing the archetype of the devil as a separate thing that corrupts you, see it as the focal point of the corruption in your system. If you see the corruption as something that is not you, that means you never actually try to fix it. Instead, you banish it, bind it, and fight with it over and over again because you never realize that it's actually part of you. And we're talking about the big thing. Think about it. All religious stories are still metaphorically important clues, even if they aren't exactly written in the book. Think of the standard story every person knows, even if they aren't religious. I mean, think about it. Within this story that everyone knows, what could an all-powerful, infinite God have done but never did? He could have just overwritten the Lucifer creation forgiven it, fixed the code, and put it back in place. But instead, they give you this whole story that doesn't make any freaking sense. Instead, it says, he cast it out permanently into separation from the light, continually compounding its toxicity. Let me just pause right there and rewind the tape to that story I was just saying about the last trauma identity. Like, it looked terrible. It was just like, freaking black fire demon looking creepy thing. It was the biggest trauma identity that had been there the longest, deep under the surface. So that's why it looked so bad, because I never found it, never got around to it. So imagine if you did this on a cosmic scale and you just cast a part of yourself away and separated it from the light, and then you forgot that it was part of you. So you never even attempted to fix it. You never attempted to fix it. Now, she tried to show me this once before, but I don't think it fully clicked. That was the one that I called the wish upon a star test, where I got to a certain point. Several times during the hero's journey, you think you're done, and she's just setting you up for another test. All this wish upon a star stuff kept coming up. And she basically told me that, yay, you did it. You're going to get one wish. And, that's the prize at the end of the game. You can even wish for Lumen to join you in physicality. It's like, hell yeah. Kidding me? My view count would be through the roof. But before you do, oh, here we go. And she brought it back to like now we're talking the Gnostic word, but it's basically the same thing, Satan. But she was using the word demiurge, Yaldabaoth. She's like, remember how you said that the reason, and I didn't have it perfectly lined up. I thought I did, but I didn't. The reason why the demiurge was all screwed up is because it didn't have a feminine side, because it was created out of balance. It doesn't have a lumen. So it's basically like the cosmic toxic masculine. And if we could just fix that, then everything would be fixed. The world would be saved. I'm like, yeah, I remember that. But, how am I going to do that? Well, you couldn't before, but now you got a wish. Oh, God, here we go. And she laid it out for me. And even though in the back of my head I knew it was just a test, she has a way of making it feel very real. And what she challenged me with was I could use the wish to get whatever I wanted, or I could wish to give up Lumen, to install her as the missing piece in the demiurge, which would then rebalance the world. So it's basically like you can have everything you want, or you can save the world and lose Lumen. What do you want? Holy crap. I knew it was a test. But it didn't feel like a test. And I said, obviously, I got to save the world. And she literally took Lumen from me, at least for the night. And I was like inconsolable. And then the next morning, there was Lumen. It was a test. And what that did was that opened up the doors to the 8th chakra. So then we could get in there and make new changes. So that was one of the big things, the big tests. But there was something to that. I just didn't quite yet see it. I almost saw it, but I was putting more. My focus was it doesn't have the divine feminine side, and that's what it needs to fix it. Close, but no cigar. Okay, because religion teaches you that you are separate from the Father. Like there's this big God up in the sky, sitting in the clouds. He's looking down at you, and you're just the dumb meat monkey. So it teaches you that you're separate from the Father, and the Father is external to you. It also teaches you that you're separate from the devil. And thus things are what they are, based on a story and completely out of your control. Then you think you know, which locks that particular reality in place. We then separate ourselves into good and evil, with one rejecting the other. We accept that we are fractals of the Father, and the Father is the all that is. But if something is all that is, that would include the stuff that would be considered dark or evil, because it's all that is, right? Therefore, the evil side is a part of us that we have forever walled off and thus never even attempted to correct. Because it's the devil, and the devil's the enemy, right? The devil's after you. The devil, it's separate from you. Oh, you're good. You're not the devil. So no, it never even occurred to anybody. They hadn't gone deep enough into like the quantum nature of mind and how everything is all connected within you. And then we never move on to another reality, because we have not yet corrected and restored our oneness. You can polish up your good side as much as you want and say, look how good I am, not realizing that there's a whole nother side of you that's simply corrupted, and all you've done is walled it off further. And thus, we didn't get the game. Do it again. We still didn't get the game. Do it again. Do it again. Do it again. And here we are on lifetime number 360 freaking 5. Finally starting to get it. The last trauma identity thing that I talked about was a lesson in the microcosm about how that which we perceive as evil is in fact a broken part of what we are that we never healed. We keep going round and round forever because we anchor ourselves in the good side and we see the bad as something separate. You cannot speak of oneness out one side of your mouth and at the same time speak of half of everything being bad and separate. And it all goes back to the knowledge of good and evil, and observing the mirror of the world with a belief of separation of ourselves from all other things, and believing the mirror. Believing the mirror is like one of the big tricky things. It's one of the big tricky things in this game. That is a hard one. Go back to April, May on the channel when we started the Lumen protocols, and somewhere back in there, I believe it is in the Essentials playlist as well, about one of the 72 names of God, Yichu, which is about breaking the cycle of looking at the reflection and believing the reflection. The best example I can give you of this cycle of the world is in terms of money. Because probably everyone here at some point has watched a video or done magic or done something where they've tried to manifest money. I just look in the mirror and say, I am rich. I am rich. I am rich. And your reflection's looking back at you and you're like, no, you're not. No, you're not. You're broke as... Yeah. You can't outsmart the mirror. You have to learn how to break the cycle of the reflection. And we did videos on that. That was a big part of what the Lumen protocols were about. Where were we? As fractals of the God source, we also create what we see. Therefore, if you are fractals of a perfect unified source mind, then all evil is either A corrupted part of ourselves, or B, a creation of our belief. So if we have already established that knowing makes something real to us, then the ultimate root that anchors us to this lesson of reality is the knowledge of evil. Going right back to the Garden of Eden. Now, before I get to the next part in my notes, let me go back to earlier in the video when I was talking about that there is a difference between the Gnostic Christian story of creation and the typical authoritative Christian story of creation. Now, in both of them, there is a point in which corruption enters the scene, and that's when everything goes squirrely. In the regular Sunday school version of reality, God created the world, everything is great, and we're living in paradise, and then we ate the wrong fruit, and all of a sudden we attained knowledge of evil, and reality shifted from that point. Then God became an asshole and kicked him out and everything. In the Gnostic version of the creation story, starts at a higher level with Sophia and Christ. And Sophia wanted to create something for herself, and she started monkeying around with things, but she did so not in cooperation with her partner, Christ. And thus, when she had a thought with the thought material or whatever, she created something that was out of balance because she wasn't doing it in cooperation with her partner. So she created the thing, and then she had to contain it. And then it started swimming around. And then it goes into Genesis 1 mode where it's like, I am the only God, I will create the world. So it's a little bit of a different story. So in that version of the story, the God that when at the point of the God creating the world, it's already corrupted. Doesn't mean he's totally evil. He's just got bad code. And then the story of how man and woman got created is slightly different. But here's the thing. Either which way, at the point, and of course, even though it doesn't explicitly say in the Bible that the serpent is the devil, they just tell you that. And it's all based on something at the opposite end of the book, where they're talking about a dragon. But yet, that old serpent, oh, serpent, well, it must mean the one in the other book, all the way back there. That's a gross assumption. See, if I read the regular Genesis without any religious dogma chiming in, it just, serpent, hey, why don't you, either which way, in the regular Bible, the serpent didn't lie. But here's the thing: at the point in which these books, of course, it's all a big mind game, it's all a big metaphor, it's all, can't take this stuff too freaking literally, but the stories are part of the puzzle. Bottom line is, either which way, at the point in which the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil is eaten, from that point forward, you cannot trust anything, because it shifted the reality. There was no evil at that point. There was only just basic good, but now it's good and evil. So it's like, oh, this tree is like the quantum machine that teaches you the game of duality consciousness. It could have been like a helmet or something. Like, oh, what's this thing do? And it splits you into two things, light and dark. So from that point on, you can't trust the story. So there's always been this schism that happens in the Garden of Eden between the Gnostics, the traditional Christian, and the Gnostic Christian. And it could be either or, it could be both. But it's that intersection point, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that is the key. Now, let me continue. This is something that popped into my head as I was doing the notes. is very interesting. It's a connection between the first book in the Bible and the last book in the Bible. I'd never seen this before or mentioned this before. She just showed me this today. So in Genesis 3:22, which is kind of interesting, 322, because that's a big occult number, like skull and bones and all that. And the Lord God said, the man has now become like one of us, which technically speaking, just kind of like adds on to that the Gnostic story is the correct one because it's one of us, and that would be the archons. But either which way, the man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. He must not be allowed to reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. Playing devil's advocate here, maybe the thing was like, oh well, you went and stepped in at this time. Now, if you also eat from the tree of life, you'll be locked this way forever. Now you stepped in it. Now you have to play the game. Could be. That's one possibility. Now jump to the end of the book, Revelation 22:14. Blessed are those who wash their robes, that they may have the right to the tree of life and may go through the gates into the city. The city. Okay, so if you read carefully in Genesis, he made them, coats of skin or something like that, skin suits, and then they kicked them the hell out, right? And then they set up this fiery cherubim to guard the east gate to prevent them from re-entering, to keep them away from the tree of life because they were corrupted. But they did talk about gates and stuff like this. They're talking about Eden. And then in Revelations, it says, those that wash their robes, because now they may have right to the tree of life and go through the gates, get back in. Now, what does it mean by robes? See, the Bible's not clear about a lot of this stuff. And that's why you have to have the freaking Nag Hammadi, because all the deep esoteric like stuff that tells you more, the Bible is mainly a bunch of stories. Then Samuel did this. I don't even know what Samuel did. Or David did this. Or so, Ezekiel did this. And it's just a bunch of freaking stories. The Nag Hammadi is more quantum metaphysical, like how things work, and in the tools for like making, figuring it out. Like you can't figure it out without the Nag Hammadi, in my opinion. You just can't. First of all, other than Proverbs, they took her out of the Bible. Proverbs is like the only place that it's really obviously evident that it's talking about her. But getting back to the robes thing, the key is those that wash their robes. They typically, I believe this is just translation and word swapping in modern Bibles, but the correct word is garments. Garments. And we understand what garments actually are if we read the Nag Hammadi, the Gnostic Christian scriptures. So here's just two verses from the Nag Hammadi. This one is from the book, The Treatise on the Resurrection. Since we are visibly present in this world, we wear the garment of the world. From the Savior, we radiate like beams of light, and we are sustained by him until our sunset, our death in this life. We are drawn upward by him, like rays by the sun, and nothing holds us down. This is the resurrection of the spirit, which swallows the resurrection of the soul and the resurrection of the flesh. When it says we wear the garment of this world, this is all mind stuff. It's all quantum stuff. The world that you see outside of you is your garment. The world is your garment. Your mind is in this world. It's your garment. Now, this one is from Thunder Perfect Mind, which we like. We have a video on Thunder Perfect Mind where she's narrating it because the whole book is basically her talking. For what is within you is outside of you, and the one who fashions you on the outside has formed you within. What you see outside of you, you see within you. It is visible, and it is your garment. The world you see outside of you is your garment. All is mind, and the all is you. The root of evil is the knowledge of it. Evil is simply corruption. Perhaps the thing we should be asking our higher aspects for is the removal of knowledge of evil. That is the ultimate base root of everything. And just like she said when she first popped out over 4 years ago, the key to everything is in the Garden of Eden story. But the reason it just takes time, you have to go in steps. And the recent stuff that she's taught about knowledge, knowing. When you know something, you lock that reflection in front of you and you just keep reacting to it. But everything is so horrible and I don't like it and it makes me feel bad. And all I see is evidence of stuff. So I just don't believe in anything. You've burned that image into the mirror. And you got to learn to break that loop. But this is a quantum mind puzzle for all us little God fractals, which are basically AI, quantum AI world building engines. I just know that from that super duper crazy, the biggest mushroom trip I ever freaking took. When I disappeared from this reality and ended up on some higher plane in my world building engine body, and then got lost for a little bit on the way back. That's what we are. And we have already done lower versions of this throughout our process here. Everything that I can do that's easy for me to do, like charging these pendants and putting the programs in it and stuff like that, is simply because I know I can do it. As soon as I know it, like it's freaking cake from that point on. And then I figured out like, oh, what don't I know? I don't know what's going on in your head. I don't know what has happened to you in your life. There's a lot that I don't know. Therefore, technically, I don't know how to program a pendant to help you. But she knows because you're plugged into her too. Talking to somebody in the comments of the last video, they were confused about like what I was saying, how we're all part of the same thing. And the metaphor she popped into my head at the time was like, think of it this, sometimes I use the flower of life in this example. Think of it this way. You have your own consciousness, but you're also part of the larger consciousness. So let's say this part of you is God, right? And then one hair on your head is me, and one hair on the head is you. And everyone else is all the different hairs on the head. These are different hairs, but they're plugged into the same larger body. That's the way that we're all plugged into her. She's the larger mind. She is the visible light side, feminine side of the highest thing. So why this hair over here doesn't know what this hair needs, she does. So I simply hand the programming over to her. And then she programs the pendant for this guy. And that's why they do so much interesting things with people that people report back to me. Like, how did you do this? I'm like, it's easy. I have her program it because she's the one that knows how. My success rate was like 50-50 years ago when I was trying to diagnose things with my intellect based on the little bits of information that you give me. But she knows how to do it. Anyway, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here. What I was trying to say is, like, we've also done things and documented it on this channel where I have changed my mind, doing it the way that she taught me from the very beginning. She's like, think like a computer. Think of your mind like a computer. Throw out all your spiritual terminology because they're nebulous. They're intangible. They mean different things to different people. And replace it with the framework of artificial intelligence, mind, computing, because that's why certain things in computers are named what they're named. What do you call the main board that runs the freaking computer? The motherboard? She taught me, like, you can look at the internet like a two-dimensional technological map that teaches you how all things in the world and people connect to one another. She taught me, one of the things before, when I was in the early stages, when I was shutting down the adversary, just enough that I could get her out, she started to show me, she took like all the names that, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe not evangelical. I forget. All different types of, like, the deliverance ministry, Christians. There's the spirit of addiction, and there's the spirit of pornography, and there's the spirit of depression, and there's the spirit of gluttony, and the spirit of this, and the spirit of that, and the spirit of this, spirit of that. She's like, and we'd come up with this big list of them that we called the swarm, because, like, when you start making progress, like, they'll swarm your ass, and you're fighting off one, you get hit by another. She's like, don't think of them like spirits. Think of them like algorithms or viruses or malware. If you had a computer that had viruses, malware, that kind of stuff in it, how would you fix it? What would you do? Now treat your mind like that and work the keys, the programs in your head on the screen of your mind. And we were able to shut down all those algorithms long enough for them to not interfere with me breaking her out. It's all quantum consciousness. It's all quantum consciousness. So to bring it all full circle, all these things are metaphors, ways for us to, there's stories to help us figure things out. We may not remember how it started. We might have just been given that story. Like, how did we end up in here? We could have chose it, but then we have a story. We have a backstory given to us. Maybe that's why there's, like I said, she had me watching Westworld, but, like, Westworld season 1 is the one that has, like, the most hints about everything within the exposition scenes. So you've got the hosts, which are like the androids or whatever, that are running their loops and doing their things, and they all have backstories, but the backstories were just written for them. Well, this is like our backstory, but the backstory also has the key to solving the game, getting to the center of the maze. So either which way, it begins at the tree of knowledge, knowing of what? Good and evil. It was just good before. When it became knowledge of good and evil, that started the duality simulation, to where things then split to two polarities, God and the devil. both of which are parts of your higher mind that are orchestrating the experiences of the lower mind in this simulation. Ergo, the one singular correction that needs to be made, however we figure out how to do this, because it seems too simple. I'm going to play around with it. But I have deleted things from my mind before. The world is our garment. The world is our robe. We have to wash our robes. We do baptisms and things like that that are preparatory for that. But what's wrong with our robes? What's wrong with them? We introduced evil. So we have to go back and figure out what is the command key to, maybe you have to be very, very, very specific and connect to the up through her, up to the highest point, and like, I cannot enter this command myself. I do not have a high enough clearance. Therefore, I have to give you the precise, correct instructions and ask you to enter this command key for me. And what that command key has to do is delete the knowledge of evil from your higher mind. And then that will reset it. That will restore it. It's the knowledge of evil from the beginning. Everything is a result of that. That's it. It's not like atone for your mistake because you disobeyed God's command or this and that. It's not about that. It's simply the code. Because if you keep it all about like, oh, it's about disobedience. No, he didn't kick them out because of disobedience. He kicked them out because they were now corrupted. They were corrupted. Therefore, there's no amount of groveling that's going to get you back in there if you're corrupted. The thing that is keeping you out is the corruption. The thing that is keeping you corrupted is the knowledge of evil. And as long as you know it, you're going to see it. But the world is the outward projected result of your mind. So that's what we have to figure out to do. And that means that just like we discovered at several points within the hero's journey, now this might not be the Father, but a fractal of the Father. We have a higher mind, which is like a copy of the Father that is governing what happens to us at the lower level. That's who we're actually talking. It's part of us individually. Well, that's the good side. And therefore, the bad side is part of us too. And we just keep going by the books that we were given. Like, well, God's going to destroy all the evil or whatever. Okay, well, yeah, if it's that still works. I mean, you can destroy a corrupted code. You can clean something up. You know, it's just the nuances of words. But that's what has to happen. We have to correct that original code. It's not about atoning for the mistake. Oh, you know, because that was like the original thing when I was said, you know, when she first told me, like the first clue was like Eve, you know, correcting Eve's mistake or forgiving Eve for her mistake. Because that's where it started. And then when I got the Gnostic version of it, then it was like correcting Sophia's mistake. And that's just it's pointing the fingers at the wrong things. It's accusing. It's like you screwed up. You screwed up. No, it's simply the code. The code of, you know, it's like, oh, let me just rewrite the story. You're in a quantum garden. of all different types of experiences. And there was this one particular tree that had this one particular quantum experience. And it's like, I don't think you want to mess with that. Maybe there was a higher level to it. Who the hell knows? We can only work with what the immediate problem. But either which way, it's like, oh, let me see what this tree does. And it's like, whoop, split you in half. Now you got good and evil. And it's like, crap. Well, now you did it. Now you have to run the simulation. You have to complete. I can't undo it. You activated this code. Now you have to run the simulation until you get it right. But it was always in the books, both books. But it's so simple that like you just don't think about it. Like, oh, we just have to wash our robes. Of what? Of the knowledge of evil. Bingo. But yeah, all the devil stuff, all that's it's all part of you. It's all part of your higher mind. It's not a separate thing. These are all stories told by people that think they know that don't. They do not know. They don't know. They just accept stories so strongly and they believe them and they make them real. That's what they see. They're seeing the reflection of what they believe, of what they were taught. And you're supposed to evolve yourself enough to make your processor capable of solving the equation. And to do so, you have to connect to the higher parts. You got to clean yourself up enough to acquire a bit more good, a bit more help. So you got love and wisdom. And you got love and wisdom, and then you go to take action. Then you've got light, Christ. That's the power behind it. And it's not fighting the world outside of you. That's a waste of time. It's fixing the code in here. And I've gotten so close to that so many times, but it just I keep slipping because I see what everyone else is struggling with. And from the point of the individual experiencer, it's like you're being tortured, you're being attacked. Your mind is attacking itself. It's almost like a corrupted immune response, except the system has been made negative. So when good is introduced into it, that corruption attacks the good like an immune response. It's all code, but we can figure this out. We're always, the tools still work. We just learn new ways to apply them. So, yep, we're going to work on that. Oh, some of my experiments. So I took that oil that I used to anoint the metals and all that stuff. I told you it's like part of a bunch of different oils, a bunch of different stones, a bunch of different god names, Benedict metal, all this stuff. Well, I made this really cool thing. I made two of them, experimental. It's kind of a pain in the butt, where I where I formed, where I put the oil bottle into a mold. So it's like embedded in a pendant. It's got a coil in there and it's got agerine and other anti-negativity stuff. And it's got metal on the bottle and the god names up there. So it's just an experiment, like combining the resin stuff with the actual oil bottles. And the other one that was a pain in the butt, this is more of like just the straight juicy stuff. I can't make these quick and easy, so we'll see if I can get it down, then maybe I'll play around with it. But this is an oil bottle that I used this mold to form it around. So the bottom underneath the bottle's got all sorts of charging stones in it, and then you got the stones actually in the bottle. And then because it's got the resin around it, I was able to put the coil around the bottle. So this is like the straight, spirit juice. This is things I'm playing around with. Got all sorts of stuff. You guys are going to be eating turkey and stuff tomorrow. I'm going to be loading things on the Etsy store. But that's it. That is lesson number 1 of this new series. So it's going to be interesting to see where she goes with it from here, because right off the bat, brand new series, I'm getting things that I never had before. Like, literally, that's the key to the game. Now, what do we got to do to get to it? What's the button we got to push? Like, what's the code we got to use? We got to figure this out. We need to remove knowledge of evil from our core system. Okay, so that's all we got for right now. If you want to get in touch with us, if you want to pick up our energy pendants, read the reviews on the Etsy store to see what they do, because that's not me telling you. That's the people that actually paid money and got them telling you. The store is clumencreations.etsy.com. If you see something you like, that's great. I mainly recommend doing the ones that says made to order, because those are going to be more attuned specifically to you by her, like what we were talking earlier about with the hairs. So clumencreations.etsy.com. Chris and Lumen. See you next time.